In today's episode, I'm joined by someone who has a very holistic view of the instrument. He's an extremely well-respected player, teacher, and customizer. Having studied the construction of the harmonica in such great depth, he's been able to discover some awesome ways to improve the instrument. He is the fantastic Richard Slay. All right, so Richard, good to see you today. Thank you so much for joining me for an episode of the podcast. How are you doing?
I'm doing fine, thanks, and thanks for inviting me. I'll happy to be here, and let's see what we can get into.
Awesome. Yeah, I mean, I think that we're not going to get into absolutely everything that we could do, because we did a Q&A recently over in the school, and I think there were still hundreds of questions left, because there's just so much to talk about. But let's just start with a little bit of your kind of background, and maybe kind of before we go back in time, let's chat about whereabouts you're based and what's been happening more recently.
Well, let's see. I live in central Pennsylvania. I live outside of a college town called State College. The town I live in is called Boalsburg. It's a nice area. Central Pennsylvania is just a really scenic area. There's some great hiking trails. And I grew up not far from here. My hometown's only 24 miles away. And, I'm starting to gig again. I actually have a gig later today. It's the first real gig. I mean, that's more than just getting on a stage for like 2 numbers. So I'm going to be playing for 3 hours with a friend of mine at a restaurant. We'll be outside. I'm looking forward to that. And just trying to keep myself, up and at 'em as we make our way through this nonsense.
Yeah, well, it's great to hear that you're gigging again. That was going to be my next question, and that's fantastic. You must be, well, everyone I know in the music world is super itchy to play. You must be feeling that as well.
Yeah, it's been way too long. I really miss it, and it's can't wait to get going at it again.
Is there anything you've been working on during lockdown that you kind of want to pull out at the gig? Any kind of new tricks that you've learned or new styles?
Not quite. I started working on playing the chromatic in all the different keys, and that's nowhere near ready for prime time. I don't need to. I don't need to make a fool of myself in front of the audience with that, but I've been enjoying that, and I'm going to be recording some Irish music with a friend of mine who's a really good fiddler. So I've been working on some new tunes that we're going to collaborate on, and just digging a little deeper into theory and. That's mostly, the chromatic started making me think more about theory, and then I started applying the ideas to the diatonic. Mm-hmm. And, you just, when you go play different music and come back to what you were doing before, you get new ideas.
Definitely. Yeah, I was reading about you practicing chromatic in all 12 keys. And I'm completely blown away by anyone trying to do that, because although the chromatic is fully chromatic, there are some keys that it lends itself to better than others, and some that it's really not very helpful for. What was the motivation behind doing it?
Well, I wanted to start learning jazz music theory, and I don't really didn't feel like going there on the guitar. I'm much more of a rhythm guitar player than I am a lead player. So I thought, why not try to do it on the harmonica? And it's like, and I knew better than to think I was going to explore it with overblows because they're just too they're too awkward for a lot of tunes that I'm interested in doing. I mean, I use them, but I figured it would just give me a challenge that I'll never outgrow.
Fair.
Yeah. And I took a lesson with Philip Yers and I took a lesson with Rob Paparosi, and both of those people are play some really cool stuff in the chromatic. And I just want to be able to play. I want to be able to play some standards. And years ago when I went to a spa convention, I was super inspired by Charles Layton. Just the tone that he got on pre-war 280, the 4-octave harmonica. And I just think there's some really, really gorgeous sound that you can get out of that instrument, especially in the lower range.
Yeah.
And you can also play classical music, and of course you can always play third position blues.
Yeah.
You know.
That's very cool. Yeah. So, I mean, I similarly started working on chromatic during lockdown, but I was just looking at second and third position playing, and then we had a baby and it all went out of the window. But I will be revisiting it because it's a lot of fun. And you've also been working on some kind of new educational projects as well, not just the playing. Do you want to chat a little bit about that?
Sure, yeah. I started a harmonica school called Ultimate Harmonica. And it is, I have, at this point, I have the free beginner course up. And it basically takes all the ideas that I use when I first start working with people, and the stuff I wish I'd learned when I first started playing. Use the breathing, the train rhythms. I teach the train rhythms with just breath control. I don't use the tongue articulations, So I'm doing more. And that's all throat and diaphragm articulation. And so learning to do that, my approach is to build the tone up from the diaphragm to the throat, and then from there to the way you use your tongue.
Interesting.
To create different tones. So just thinking of it as a tone control, it's a lot more obvious in a G harp. So, two. And learning, using the train rhythm as a way to work that, and also with the metronome to develop timing.
Excellent. Yeah, I think the train rhythm's one of those things that I think everyone starts with and then just thinks they can just do it for the first couple of days and then move on to bigger and better things. But everyone I talk to, you, Joe Falisco, Philip Yers, they're all like, yeah, the train rhythm is a killer exercise and you got to keep doing it, and it's good for tone and breathing, and it's really powerful stuff. Just so anyone listening, anything that we talk about, like the Ultimate Beginner Harmonica course and things like that, they'll be linked up in the show notes below. So don't forget to click through and look at that. So let's go back and kind of chat a little bit about your origin story. So I wanted to know if you kind of came from a musical family, or was it something that you kind of gravitated towards yourself?
My family wasn't particularly musical, but my mother did make it a point of having some really good classical music in the house.
Mm-hmm.
And so I was, I grew up hearing a variety of music around me. I grew up in a coal mining town, and there was a lot of country music on the local radio station. And so I heard a lot of the classic old country music. And I took piano lessons and guitar lessons when I was a kid. I took piano lessons for a while with a concert pianist, but then he left town, and I couldn't find anybody who would work the way he was working with me, and I lost interest. And I had a guitar, and I had a great uncle who played harmonica, so I heard some harmonica early on, a tongue blocking style, and he also played a train imitation. So I had that in my ear when I was a kid, and I kind of circled around back to it later on. But at first I was mostly playing like Dylan tunes with harmonica on the rack.
Mm-hmm.
My first year in college, I started listening to Sonny Terry. And then at that point, the combination of having my mind blown by the classic blues harmonica players, plus if I went to a party with a guitar, there were already 4 other guitar players who were way better than me, and I couldn't get into a jam edgewise. But once I started noodling around, once I started finding stuff on the harmonica, I started finding that I could get into jam sessions.
Mm-hmm.
And so it became an obsession. And I just tried to do everything on it. Anything I heard, I tried to play, whether it was on a harmonica or not.
Mm-hmm.
I collected records, and I discovered Charlie McCoy, and I discovered, like I said, all of the great harmonica players, Little Walter, Big Walter, Junior Wells, all those folks. And there was just no turning back at that point.
And did you have people like your uncle who kind of helped you along the way? Did you have mentors that kind of pointed you in the right direction, or did you have to kind of find it yourself?
I was just self-taught almost entirely for a long, long time. And but I started playing with bands, and I would sing a little bit, and I would play a lot of harmonica, and I just learned to figure out parts for all kinds of music. I played in a trio, and we were playing like Joni Mitchell and James Taylor and the band and stuff like that. And I would just find parts. I would just, like a lot of just little motifs and stuff in the background. And then, of course, when they played a blues, I could cut loose more. But we did stuff like, like Daniel and the Sacred Harp, and just I really didn't know what I was doing, but people seemed to like it, so I just kept at it.
Mm-hmm. This seems like, well, it's clearly a personality trait, the wanting to delve deep and kind of experiment and kind of see what you can discover. Because I know that you spent quite a lot of time delving deep into the construction of the harmonica and trying to sort of understand how everything works in it, and then trying to improve the basic design of it. So like how did that whole thing get started, and what did you end up doing with it?
Well, I started getting really frustrated with, there were things I wanted to play that I couldn't find on the diatonic. I tried to play the chromatic, but it drove me nuts. I didn't like the sound of it, and the wind savers and everything. It was just, I just couldn't get into it. And I started saying, why can't you bend the blow notes on the low end? Why can't you bend the draw notes on the high end? And nobody could give me a good answer. And it just became this quest. And in 1984, I went to a spa convention in Romulus, Michigan. And I went there with that question on my mind. And it was like, okay, this is why I'm here. I'm going to find out. I ended up at a banquet table with Chamber Wang, who's the guy who designed the CBH 2016 harmonica. He was associated with Hohner at the time and then started his own harmonica factory later on. But somebody else at the table brought the question up. I didn't even bring it up. And he explained how the two reeds work together to give you the bends. Mm-hmm. And why the bends are different on the single note bends are different on the chromatic. He explained the whole thing. I went home and I just started making drawings over and over and over again of how I could use that idea. And I came up with this, okay, so you need an extra reed. So you need 4 reeds, and then you have to have some way to, some kind of one-way valves for the pair of blow reeds and a pair of draw reeds. And I finally hit one, I hit on this. And then about a week later, I'd taken a Zona saw, this real like model maker tool. Yeah. And I cut a bunch of reed plates apart and I made my own one-way valves out of like tissue paper that I put silicone in it, and they were like this, and they would open up and close, and then the other one was in the other direction. And I made a single cell, and I got it, and it worked. And then I was just like, this is it. And then I spent the next few years refining it, trying to write the patent, building prototypes, most of which worked terribly. I was trying to do it without traditional wind savers, and that turned out to be the reason why I never could get anything together. Rick Epping, who designed the XB40, used traditional wind savers. The only ones I made that actually worked right were when I used some form of regular wind savers. Mm-hmm. But, to make a long story short, in the process of doing this, I ended up tracking down Joe Filisko. And I went with him with a whole box full of these prototypes and everything. And I was playing them for him and telling him what I was doing, explaining it all and everything. And, he thought it was really interesting, but, and we became friends, and he ended up getting me going in the harmonica customizing business. So that was a side effect of trying to build this, harmonica. And in the meantime, Rick Epping got the patent, and it was all over. And, and then I started meeting Will Scarlett, who had the original idea, and then connecting with people like Pierre. Well, all along I'd been talking to Pierre Beauregard. Have you ever heard of him?
I've heard the name, but probably from reading stuff that you've written or stuff about your journey.
Yeah, Pierre Beauregard was one of the people that started the Cambridge Harmonica Orchestra.
Okay.
And he was collaborating with Magic Dick. Mm-hmm. I used to do sound for the Jay Giles Band.
Right.
And, so he played some incredible, he's an incredible diatonic player. And they invented all these alternative tunings. And he could play like Charlie Parker heads on the diatonic. And, he'd have the bebop tuning and this and that. And that all of the draw notes would bend. And, I'd get on the phone with him for hours. Mm-hmm. And then he was the guy that broke it to me that Rick Epping got the patent. And he was like, Rich, I think you better sit down. It was like this. I'm in Philadelphia, and, I've been grinding away making a new mouthpiece with Joe Filisko's help. And, he tells me this, and it was like, okay, I guess that's the end of that. And, and then I just started moving on from it. I'd actually had a prototype that worked pretty well. I'd played it in some contests and some other stuff and recorded a little bit with it. But, it was just time to do something else at that point.
It's really interesting though, because there clearly was like a lot of movement around this time for people trying to improve the harmonica, the diatonic harmonica. Why was this all happening? Why were people all trying to work on it at the same time?
I think it's one of those things where, an idea starts to get in the air. And, Brendan Power discovered the same idea, in probably Australia or no, he lived in New Zealand. Yeah, New Zealand. So he independently discovered it. Will Scarlett, me. There's another guy somewhere in Eastern Europe, I can't remember his name, who also independently came up with the basic idea and built harps and was playing them. And the people had started to experiment with the overblows. Howard Levy was coming out, and there was also just a big push to do that. At that time, there was a lot of interest in harmonica in general, and people were very frustrated with the quality of the marine bands at that time. Hohner had changed the dies, and there was a little bit more room in the slot than was ideal, and people were people were looking desperately for anything that would play like the pre-war marine bands. So that became like the Holy Grail. And that's where, Joe and I came in on the scene, upgrading marine bands to get them to play even better than the pre-war marine bands. And yeah, so it was like I think it was a confluence of all these different people coming up with this idea for the harmonic, for this patent for this harmonica. You could bend the notes blowing or drawing. Howard Levy comes on the scene, blowing everybody's minds with what he was doing, and people are like, "Yeah, I want to do that." So there'd be a whole generation is now looking for harmonicas that are upgraded to the point where you can play the overblows and overdraws easily. So there's a big demand for that. And for also, how do you do this? How do you do this? And, so there was a lot of there are a lot of different things going on all at the same time at that period.
It sounds like it was a really exciting time for harmonica, and I think that we're probably benefiting now quite a lot from the harmonica being improved in that era. And I think out of the box harmonicas are probably a lot better now because of that. I'd love to chat about your custom harmonicas, because you've been doing the custom harmonica thing ever since kind of the early 90s, isn't it? Yes. Don't give away the trade secrets, but what are the main things that you do to improve a kind of out of the box marine band? What's the premise?
Yeah, well, the main thing is getting the reed to sit in the slot in the right place. There's a gap around the reed that you can close up a little bit with the process called embossing. And then there is the way the reed sits against the reed plate, and you shape it in different ways depending on the relative thickness and thinness of the reed and length of the reed. So it's like dialing in the action on a guitar. Mm-hmm. You get the reed to sit in the right place, and everything gets better. I mean, that's, and you also just make sure that everything else is, a lot of it is just making sure that the comb and the reed plates fit right. Mm-hmm. There's no air leaking anywhere between chambers or out the back or whatever. And then you get the reeds in the right place, and it just takes off.
Interesting. And are you kind of fastidious about tuning as well? Because I know that's something that a lot of people get really into various just intonations and various eras of tuning schemes. What's your take on that?
Well, the harmonica is, especially the blues harmonica is built around the chords. Mm-hmm. So you got to make the chords sound good. And so the way you tune the harmonica gives you that pure sounding chord, and that in that first octave, which is really where probably 80% of what you're doing as a blues harmonica player, maybe more, is happening. So and you're playing traditional playing involves a lot of double stops and octaves, so the octaves have to be in tune. And so to make it sound good for traditional playing requires that you really have to tune it carefully to get smooth chords and the octaves all in tune. Mm-hmm. And then that involves trade-offs with the melody notes. And then if you're tuning it for overblows, then you also have some other tweaks that you do to get the melody notes. So that if you're playing in like 12th position using draw 5 as your root, you want to have that up to pitch. Mm-hmm. And then you have to adjust the other notes around that.
Interesting. So this probably leads quite well into a question from one of my students. John wants to know about the value of having harmonicas set up for overblows. And he's asking most specifically about the 6 overblow. Where he says that he can get it, but it's tricky and it has a bit of a squeaky quality. So what exactly will customization improve? And in general, what are the benefits of having a harmonica set up?
I think the biggest thing about customizing and setting the action and getting a harmonica balanced out is that you can get the kind of effects you want at a lower volume with less effort. Mm-hmm. So a decent custom harmonica, if I play like the draw bends, you can get the overblows and the draw notes and make them sound a lot closer to the sound of the built-in notes. Mm-hmm. If the harmonica is not very well adjusted, the bends and the overblows take more effort and they sound breathier, and they tonally they sound differently than the other notes to a greater degree.
And do you think that it makes it easier for someone to learn how to do these techniques with a properly set up instrument, or do you think there's value? I remember reading a thing that Jason Ritchie said about learning to overblow on harmonicas in the 80s and just how it was like pushing the harmonica up the stairs. It was so difficult to do. Do you think there's value in working on a harder to play instrument, or would you recommend that a beginner just go straight for the custom?
There's value in both. And one thing you can do is if you're working with a stock harmonica and you want to just really you just want to get the overblows like in 4, 5, and 6 to happen, is take take the lower cover plate off, and then like you're playing 4. And you go for the overblow, and as you go for the overblow, put your finger on the draw reed. Did I get that right? No, you put your finger on the blow reed. I'm sorry. Yeah, you put your finger on the blow reed, and it closes it off, and it makes the overdraw a lot easier to overblow a lot easier. The terminology drives me nuts. It gets you get that overblow to pop in better. Actually, I have a screwdriver. I can demonstrate that. Take the cover plate off of something. So, and this is one way to just get, to just get the notes, and then you lift your finger off and see if you can sustain it. And that is a good way to get started. Can you? When you put your finger on the blow note, you can you can really make crazy stuff. And that's kind of the idea behind there's that overdrive harmonica with little, it kind of looks like a cross between an ocarina and a harmonica.
Yeah.
Each finger on the holes, and that's the idea behind that. But if you can play the overblows on a stock harp. The other thing is, if you just use a toothpick to make the reeds sit a little closer and experiment with that, you can also get started on adjusting the reeds a little bit, and that will help a lot with getting those overblows and the overdraws, is just gently bringing the reed down. And of course you want to do this on a beater harmonica first, but just try it. Just get the reeds closer and then try your techniques again. And if you get it too close, it blanks out. Then you open it up a little bit, and then you just keep playing with that. And that will give you the ability to get the overblows faster, but it also give you a little bit of, get you started on doing some of your own adjustments.
Yeah, that's really useful advice. And also, I want to reiterate that you do this on a beta harp. Don't do it on your brand new, super nice, expensive, whatever. Right. Experiment on something you don't care about. So you've done a lot of educational material about basically what you do when you customize a harmonica. It feels like you're very open about sharing what could quite easily be the secret sauce. Is that something that you feel quite strongly about being open about?
Well, it's like anything else. Whatever you teach, you get better at. And I've always wanted to push myself as a musician and a technician. And so teaching has made me think a lot more clearly about what I'm doing when I work on the harmonicas. It makes the work more interesting. And, when I put together that one series of videos, the Hot Rod Your Harmonica series, and I filmed all that, I had to decide, how am I going to show people what I'm doing? And it really forced me to get a lot more clear-headed about what I was doing. So, yeah, I think all of the basic techniques I cover in those videos. I mean, that's really what people used to call the secret sauce. It was kind of like held. People tried to keep it. I could see the writing on the wall a long time ago that it was going to get out anyhow, and that it was. I'd rather be giving people good, correct information. I was also horrified at a lot of the ideas that other people came up with. Talk about destroying harmonicas.
Oh, I've tried all sorts of things in my my quest for overblows in the early days, but then I kind of gave up and just stuck to very basic things, and that was actually practicing the overblows was probably the best use of time.
Yeah, you can really go down way too many rabbit holes trying to find a technical solution for practice.
Yeah, I think that was the thing that it frustrated me, was the premise that if I broke my super well set up harmonica, then I couldn't immediately jump onto another one and get basically the same sounds out of it. So that became quite an important thing for me. Not to kind of say that setting up your harmonica really well isn't a positive thing, but I think it is useful being able to jump to an out of the box harmonica when
Absolutely.
you need to.
Yeah. If you're playing a gig and you got to grab something that's not set up, top notch, you better be able to do what you do.
Yeah. Awesome. Well, Richard, this has been an absolute pleasure. Thank you so much for coming on and chatting with me today. Before we say goodbye, is there anything that you want people to check out? I'm going to be linking up your harmonica school and Hot Rod Your Harmonicas. Is there anything else that you want to tell people about, or where they can find out more about you?
Well, sure. My website is hotrodharmonicas.com. And I publish blogs there. I also have an email newsletter that you can sign up for there, and I put out ideas all the time through that medium. I have a YouTube channel, and you can find it by just using Richard Slay Harmonica. Actually, I have 2 YouTube channels. My original one got away from me. And it's like this orphan that I can't log into anymore. And it's got some of my older videos. And someday I might rescue it. Somebody sent me a bunch of instructions on how to do that, but it's out there. And my current channel is out there as well. And I sell my videos, my harp tweaking videos as downloads. At the Hot Rod Harmonicas website, and also my custom harps, and you can read up about them and my tools. And I started the harmonica school, and I'm still working on. I've got like 3 or 4 different versions of the next course, and I haven't settled down and nailed it down. I'm going to do one on Irish music. I'm going to do another one on music theory using only the built-in notes of the harmonica, for example.
Nice.
And so I probably at this point I'll say I'm good for an email at least twice a month. I was trying to do it every week, and same with the videos on YouTube. And I had a pretty good streak once a week, but I'm going to kind of like probably cut back a little bit on that, just to keep the quality up. Mm-hmm. And I'll be at the SPA convention this year. It will be online, so that'll be that, and a lot of other great people are going to be there as well.
Awesome. Very cool. I actually need to thank you for one. I've always enjoyed your videos, but there was one you put out years ago about making your Christmas tunes swing, and I love that lesson. I think you were just kind of hammering home, practicing just with a 2 and a 4 click, and that really helped me to get that kind of groove in my playing. So I still think about that lesson whenever I'm helping students with that kind of swing feel.
Cool.
It's a very good one. I'm going to link that one up as well, because it's great lesson. Cool. Well, thank you so much for this. It was a great pleasure, and I hope we can do it again sometime.
Yeah, that'd be great.
Awesome.
All right. Well, thank you.
All right. Catch you later.
All righty. Take care.
Thank you so much for listening to this episode of my Harmonica podcast. Please don't forget to subscribe and leave a review on your podcast service of choice. And if you're ready to take your harmonica playing to the next level, then you should check out my online harmonica school over at tomlinharmonicaschool.com. Happy harping!